Hi, Saturday, and let's cover some somewhat interesting things maybe. Firstly, much warmer here. We've had a couple of days of maybe close to 25, which today is as well. And that brings a new problem around here, certainly in my modeling room, ants. So the ants have all got excited about the warm weather, and they have some pathway up in the ceiling, and that the model room that I'm in, the ceiling is at an angle like that, which runs right underneath a corrugated iron. But somewhere up there, and probably in many places, are lines of ants. And do you think this stuff does anything? This gel, we've used this other places in the house where I can see you put a little blob and not a single ant touched it or died because of it, or even looked at it. I've sprinkled the ant sand around on the outside of the house. Difficult to know what effect that has. But anyway, I have an ant problem, and the little bits of ants come falling down from the ceiling, and dead ants. So onto models and things. So problem that I would really like to resolve, and I have no idea how. I got another one of these vampires, this 1/72nd vampire, but I thought I'll just show you this. So look, when I angle it into the light and it catches the light there, you can see that there's virtually no glossiness except one little spot here which looks like a glue mess actually. So it looks like this sheet probably got damp at a stage, and it looks a lot to me like almost all of the decals, I don't know if you can actually see that, they've got a bit of silvering on the paper there. You can just make that out there, which means this set is probably barely usable, or if you get them off, then you have to rely on decal sol and set to ensure that they adhere, and then seal them under an acrylic layer. But it's worth trying. So because there's two different marking sets there, there are spares that I can try, and I have others anyway, so it's not a big deal. But it's just, sometimes you have an old set, you don't really know what's happened with this. Sometimes when models are kept in garages or something, very damp areas, especially winter, you get condensation, weird things can happen to decal sheets. Right, so the big thing is the undercarriage done on this Blackburn Skua, which, if I can, let's try upside down. So that door was there, but performed just about zero function for the rest of the undercarriage, and the leg itself was just not properly molded. I don't know how anyone would have ever built that. So eventually I had to sort of submit to say, pull the leg off the door again and make brass legs, which means I didn't need to do as I said, which was build in tubes like that. I was able to just drill further into which you won't really see that easily now, drill further into the wing. It's got that little sort of square base there. It just didn't have anything there to hold a tube, so I managed to drill that well. And the Skua is interesting because its undercarriage sort of looks, it's a bit backwards slanted. So in level flight it's actually facing at about an angle like that, and when it's on the ground it's not quite as forward as other aircraft. So you've got to, I had to look at pictures and make sure I get that angle right and get it right twice in a row. Then I had to make the brass legs at about exactly the same height, which I didn't manage to do, and drill them into the wing. And the way you then tell that is that when you put it on the table and put a ruler next to it and measure each wing to the same height, mine wasn't exactly. So I had to sand off underneath one of the wheels a little bit more, which is quite effective. So I've got a bit of wheel flattening, and actually everything came out perfectly. Glue the doors on with super glue. Make sure you've got the right wheel diameter for that brass tube. So the only thing I didn't do, and make sure, that, of course, that you have the right, as you're drilling, that you have the right cant inwards and forwards and backwards. A little bit of a challenge to actually put on undercarriage. I would call this 98% perfect. You'd hardly know. I mean, I'm not really spotting anything wrong there. So what I didn't do with this, which I did do with a Vampire undercarriage, which I did some months ago, the Vampire I had cut off and then soldered the wheel, the little wheel axle part onto the vertical part of the leg. This one I just did a bend, which is not ideal, but for this particular spot where you can hardly actually see, you can see that bend in there, so it doesn't look perfect when looked at from this angle, but it's fine for this particular model. Oh, so next up I'm doing the canopy framing. In fact, I'll probably start that today, and I'm going to do that with the tape stick down method. So I paint some sellotape on a piece of glass, cut strips, and I'm putting it onto here. So it's not as durable long term. Some of the sellotapes lift off, but it's a fast and much more enjoyable method than masking canopy windows, canopy panes. Propeller did get damaged in a little accident, but I've got spares, got so many spares from so many models, so this will eventually get done. I'm not going to say that this is even remotely a favorite aircraft. This is a weird aircraft, but I'll be glad to see it done. Okay, the wings are onto this particular Harvard. Now, you'll remember that I was just trying to get the fillet joint both sides really good, which I eventually did. And so you've got to make sure that you've got a smooth joint, leading edge and trailing edge there, leading edge here. That it's perfectly 90 there. Now that part I can't guarantee that it is. It probably isn't actually, the way I look at it right now. Now what that means is if I've got it on perfectly onto the fillet joints, but the wings aren't perfectly 90 to the tail, that the fuselage was molded with the two fillet sections not equal. And that's okay. I mean, to be honest, when it's standing on the table, you'd never know. All it would mean is that the fin is ever so slightly tilted off to one side. If you're doing something like that on a model where you're manipulating the fuselage and the wing joint to eventually get a smooth joint, and then you're gluing it in, you don't have to apply your glue both sides at first. You can just go for one side on the assumption that you can run some thin glue onto the other side once done. And the reason that I sometimes say that is that allows you to focus on just the one side if it was being a little bit tricky. If it's no big deal, then just do both sides at the same time. I also filled that. So this one's moving on. Horizontal stabs will go on next. Seats will go in. I haven't quite made up my mind on which color scheme. It will be the box markings, but I suppose I should do one in yellow, but I don't want to do just a bright yellow. I'd like to do a little bit of a slightly weathered yellow. Okay, motorbikes. Now, just a reminder, all three of these bikes that you're seeing here, which is Hayabusa, Ducati 888, and the NS 500, not the NSR 500, the NS 500R, which I will show closer shortly, are a batch of about 8 bikes that I got from someone that were built up to about halfway. Various bits of painting done and assembly done. With the Hayabusa, I've decided to leave off all of the bodywork and leave it as a naked frame for the reason that when all the Hayabusa bodywork is on, it's absolutely identifiable as a Hayabusa, and you don't get to see a whole lot of the rest of the bike. So while this looks sort of incomplete, that is exactly what I'm going to go for over here. Allows you to see the very wide frame of the Hayabusa, and it'll look interesting. And I've got other Hayabusas which will be the complete bike, so that's what that one will be. So there's not a whole lot of stuff left to go on. I was pondering on putting some sort of little tailpiece in a seat so that at least looks slightly rideable, but we'll see. This one, just last night I put the fairing on. This one I sprayed in December, so almost a year ago. And a lot of challenges with this bike, but it is looking pretty good. The tank is ready and can go on. I just haven't glued it on yet. Handlebars, some of the cabling, foot pegs, and that's about it. So this one is very, very close to done. I don't think I did. This is something I should actually do. Keep a little log of model builds and what was the paint layers that you've done on it, because I can't remember if I've done the acrylic floor coating on this one to seal everything. Because with so many decals, your likelihood of damage with touching it a lot is quite high. So that'll be finished next time, probably, next video I make. This Ducati 888, I decided to do a bit of mod on there, leave off the fairing and leave off that big tail piece. Make it, I sort of glued that on, just made it into a little bit of a street fighter, and I need to put on a headlight. So it needs the handlebars glued back up. It needs some sort of headlight mounting, which is sort of easy because it's just a bit of plastic working with stretched sprue and so on. And I think if this one's got the foot pegs on, maybe that's it. Just the headlight and handlebars back up, and then that one's done. Now that's another example of that chrome which I was speaking about the other day, the L-clad chrome, and I'm really hoping that I put the acrylic floor wax on it. It feels like it. That acrylic floor wax has got a particular feel, and you know, when your models get dusty, it's also somewhat easier to just brush off the dust with that floor wax coating. Lets the dust come off quite easily. So I'll have a few bikes ready. This one had that slightly interesting effect that, I don't know if this is going to come through with that lighting, where I put the tin foil, the aluminium foil, on the back of the tail light so that you get a little bit of a reflection, but it's not the easiest to actually catch it. So at any normal view it actually still looks dark like that. To actually get the brighter view, which means that if you want to bring a little bit of life to the bike, you almost are sort of set for the LED, at least a single LED or two LEDs, which I will do. I will be putting LEDs in some of the models, and sometimes even a very, very simple, just a single LED makes a worthy difference. This guy, when he built this one, just going to show you this, it is worth noting. So you see on the swing arm right over there, I think he tried to glue onto these plated parts. Now, although this part glues down here, he probably was holding it upside down and pouring glue onto there. And it wasn't gluing because you can't glue plating. But some people cause a bit of damage to their models because they try very hard to do so. You can get it glued with super glue, of course, but it's not, you know, your best result is you need to scrape the joint. And then after these three are fixed up, and they go on the shelf, which I'm seriously running out of shelf space, I will be making progress on the odd bike here and there as I'm sort of dabbling with the aeroplane models. So I guess one of the things I will be talking about on the Harvard coming up very soon, which I have spoken about on other Airfix models that I've done, is that light sanding after painting to get rivet detail to show through your paintwork. But that only really works if the plastic color is different enough, is contrasted enough to your final color to actually be visible. So if I'm going to be painting a yellow and this is a dull gray, it's not much of a visibility. Now, one of the things that you can do is paint a dark color, spray a dark base coat, so that when you sand and only those tiny little dots of rivet come through the yellow, that they actually have that little black bit of paint hopefully playing into that, which I might actually do, because I already know that the result of sanding this very light grey on yellow is going to be a bit of a useless endeavour. It'll be ever so slightly visible, but not the interesting effect that I'd be looking for. So, dark base coat, but when you paint yellow over a dark colour, then you're not going to get a great yellow. So I need to be a little bit careful with how I do that. I might need 2 yellow coats, but I do want those rivet, when I sand very lightly, I would like those rivet lines to come through. A couple of things that I can mention before we finish off on this video. While I don't always use glue on canopies, I do sometimes, and those sometimes probably means they were models that didn't matter that much. So these I think are glued on with styrene glue, because I can now push and fit the tape bits for the canopy masking without worrying about popping this off, because when you glue it with the crystal clear and things like that, it's on, but it can still be popped off fairly easily. Now, I have mentioned that this canopy molding was not great to this fuselage, so there was this huge gap there which I couldn't be bothered about. If you're doing a little bit of undercarriage fix up, you see those bays which are absolutely bare and plain and flat. Could do with a little bit of spicing up and a bit of stretched sprue, or even cutting a little piece of grid. You know that I've got some inside. I don't think I've got any right here at this very moment. The little vegetable bags, which are just a plastic grid. You can cut a very small bit of that depending on the nature of the grid, or if you just have other plastic grids, and sort of, you know, make up something that you can glue to the inside part of the wing before you even put the wings together, just to give you a bit of undercarriage bay detail, which, you know, might be better than nothing. Okay, I think that's it for now. Next one we'll cover some motorbikes and a bit of progress on the Harvard. Happy modeling. Cheers.